Remember the Republican response to Biden's State of the Union address that we watched just a few days ago? Funny story about that. At one point during the really bizarre, incoherent, jarring, extremely creepy response that even right-wingers didn't seem to like, bit of a drama here. If you could believe that she would lie about something like this, at one point during her spiel, she said that there was a victim of sex trafficking who was constantly. There was like a big part of the story. I mean, she really dove into this topic with a weird tone, very lurid, very inappropriate, I feel. She lied about it. She said it was because of Biden, and apparently this whole thing happened under the Bush administration. That's what I heard. Is there more to this? Hold on. Wait, okay, now we're both going to educate ourselves, okay? 1 second. Doubts have been cast. Oh, wait, we should actually listen to the bit first. Hold on, sorry. I heard that there was one lie. I guess there's been 50. 1 second.
The American family needs to have a tough conversation because the truth is, we're all worried about the future of our nation. The country we know and love seems to be slipping away, but minutes after taking office, he suspended all deportations, he halted construction, he invited it. This crisis is despicable, Biden proudly proclaims. No doubt, we're at a crossroads. Settle for an America in decline.
Wait, where's the part where she talks about the... Why would you not include the part where she says the thing? Okay. Why include this clip? There's another clip that you could have made that would have included her making the statement relevant to the damn... Okay. Annoying. Doubts have been cast on the accuracy of a story about horrific child sex abuse told by Republican Senator Katie Britt in her widely ridiculed speech delivered in rebuttal to President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. The journalist and author Jonathan Katz has accused Britt of being fundamentally dishonest for invoking the case of a woman who had been sex trafficked at age 12 and multiple times to illustrate the supposed failure of the Biden administration's border control policies. Now, first of all, I need to repeat the fundamental criticism that I offered while watching this live before I knew that she was lying because, I can't fact check on the fly like that. The argument being made here essentially is she met with a girl who had been sex trafficked at age 12 and her response to this story is we need to close our border, implying that what she wants is for the 12-year-old to have just been raped in Mexico rather than in America. In fact, it's only because, in her story, the person was sex trafficked to America that they eventually ended up getting free and being able to tell the story. Whereas what she's advocating for is, no, if we close the border, she could have stayed in Mexico, where she presumably would have been, remained a sex slave for the remainder of her life. I don't know. But that was the earnest. They wrote that. That wasn't off the cuff. That was in a script. This was the response to the State of the Union address. Republicans thought, I have a great idea, The controversy further intensifies the spotlight on Britt, a rising Republican star, I'm sure, after she came under fire from members of her own party for delivering this rejoinder. In that speech, Britt described traveling to the Del Rio sector of the U.S.-Mexico border and cited the case of an unidentified woman who Britt said confided harrowing experiences. The senator implied these were a direct result of the ongoing crisis at the border, which Republicans have sought to exploit as a campaign issue. Quote, I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me, Britt said. Quote, she had been sex trafficked by the cartel starting at age 12. By the way, as I've said many times before, the most vulnerable demographic for sex trafficking in America are undocumented immigrants because they're outside of the law and they can't go to police for help without risking their presence in the United States. So if you want to oppose sex trafficking, which I think you should, the best way to do that is a path to legalization for all people living in the United States. Literally, that is the best thing you could do, because then they have the ability to go to the police, they can protect themselves. Republicans are completely okay with nonstop widespread sex trafficking because its presence serves a dual purpose. For one, it enables the suffering of brown people, which they like. And for two, it lets them fearmonger to white suburban women who think that they're going to get sex trafficked out of the parking lot of a Target in the middle of North Dakota. You know, like they want the sex trafficking numbers to continue to exist, because then like the demographic least likely to be targeted gets to like continue to fearmonger and then vote for more funding for police or whatever. I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. Brit said she had been sex trafficked by the cartel starting at age 12. She told me not just that she was raped every day, but how many times a day she was raped. I want to iterate once more that Brit said all of this in an extremely creepy and inappropriate tone, disingenuously, waving her voice, very creepy, very off-putting, very weird thing to include in a State of the Union address. She was like smiling, she was like doing the like, it was like actually extremely weird. I can't overstate that. I know that I'm politically incentivized to play up how weird it is, but I want you to understand that even if I was like a totally grilling apolitical normie, it's off, and everyone agrees. The senator did not say where or when the events occurred, but in an outraged tone, she implied that they had happened in the U.S. on Biden's watch. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it's past time we started acting like it. President Biden's border crisis is a disgrace. It's despicable, and it's almost entirely preventable. So again, like, her prescription for this, her solution to the problem of 12-year-olds getting sex trafficked is she thinks it should just happen in Mexico, being sex trafficked from one part of Mexico to another part of Mexico, rather than over to America to American demons, or whatever that industry manifests itself as in this on this side of the border. This is Zizek's bridge joke IRL. Literally. Thank you for reminding me. Any incorporation here. Hold on. Give me it from YouTube. Thank you. It's this, but at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Okay, we can begin. Yes. Okay. Now, what you see here is, at least in summer or in the fall, one of the nicest views of Ljubljana. It looks like Paris, green leaves, etc. On both sides, nice old houses, nothing special. But you are wrong. This river here is the official geographical limit between Balkan and Middle Europa. So beware. On the other side, horror, Oriental despotism, women get beaten, and like it. On this side, Europe, civilization, women get beaten but don't like it. So, Balkan, Middle Europa, don't forget it.
So, yeah, basically, Brit's argument is that if this sex trafficking victim had simply stayed in Mexico, all would be as it should. However, in a 7-minute video posted on TikTok, Katz, a former AP reporter who has written on drug wars in Mexico, cited details that appeared to show the story Brit was describing had happened not just outside the US, but many years before Biden became president. And thanks to you guys, I believe I have that video. 7 minutes, you say? Here's an 8-minute video.
Backlash growing over the Republican response to U.S. President Joe Biden's state.
Nope, this is a broader video. Let me see if I can find the full TikTok response. I see a small clip from it. Gotta find the full thing. Here we go. Exposing lies in politics. From Cats on Earth.
So you have no doubt seen this woman on your For You page at various points today. That is Senator Katie Britt, the junior senator from the state of Alabama, who delivered the Republican response to Joe Biden's State of the Union last night. It was weird, but the part that was the weirdest for me, the part that was the most off, was this.
When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas.
Here we go.
That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12.
So I immediately had questions. Who was this woman? How did she meet her? How did she get her to tell her this story? Also, she seems to be describing something that had happened over the process of years. She said that it started when this woman was 12, and she says that she's a woman now, so it seems that some time has passed. How much of this happened on the border? What country did it happen in? Did it happen before Joe Biden was president? Senator Britt, right after that, stated pretty directly what side of the border it happened on, or at least she implies it very strongly.
And we wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America.
Yeah.
All right, so there's the answer. It happened in the United States. Or did it? So I looked a little bit to see if I could figure out what Senator Britt was talking about here. And I found it pretty easily. Senator Brit has told the story over and over and over again since going on this trip. So all I had to do was look for details of the trip, see if there was any information about who she talked to, and if there was any more information about this case there. And I think I found it pretty easily. So in January 2023, Senator Brit, who had just become the junior senator from Alabama, traveled to southern Texas to the Del Rio district near the border of Mexico with two other Republican senators, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee and Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi. And Senator Blackburn had all of the information about it on her website, her senatorial website. During this trip, among other scheduled visits, the senators had what they described as a round table, although you can see it's not a round table, it's a long table on which they are sitting.
Yet
on
more
one side of it.
dishonesty
It's a
from the
press
right.
conference. They were there with a Fox News contributor, Sarah Carter, who often does sort of the xenophobic anti-immigration coverage, as well as a Mexican congresswoman who's
Credit this guy, H-Bomb's always watching. I'm trying to find opportunities to pause and like add my own debate, but he's just like explaining into it. So there's nothing for me to add yet. You know, I'm like waiting. Praise be to cats. Praise be to the channel, Cats on Earth. H-Bomb, don't kill me. Thank you.
An anti-human trafficking activist, as well as this woman, who the senators identify as Carla Jacinto Romero. All I had to do was click on Carla Jacinto Romero's name, that hyperlink, on Senator Blackburn's page, and it took me to this. This is Carla Jacinto Romero's testimony to Congress from 2015 about her experiences in Mexico. And if you scroll down, you see it took place between 2004 and 2008.
So Biden did.
I don't know what they put in the textbooks in Alabama these days, but Joe Biden wasn't the president of the United States in 2004 or 2008. He wasn't even the vice president of the United States. That wouldn't happen until 2009. In 2004 to 2008, the president of the United States was George W. Bush. Vice president was Dick Cheney. And none of that really matters here because these events didn't happen in the United States.
This is the thing that I don't understand. When Republicans, okay, so it makes me wonder if the GOP did any fact checking, right? Because this is a lie that you're now going to repeat on the level of a State of the Union address response. If you're going to make something up like this, why not just make it all up? Like, why not just lie about some new, completely independent thing? Like, why tie it to something that can be fact-checked at all? Just say, like, I made a trip down to Mexico and talked to a victim of the cartels and da-da-da-da. Like, just make it up completely. Make it completely unverifiable, you know? Like, wouldn't that be easier than this? It's not like it would be any detriment to you if you did that. But look how long it took to fact-check it. In the meantime, the GOP has been able to get out 50 more lies. No. That doesn't apply here. This State of the Union address response has been bad for them. This has been an embarrassment. Brit looks bad. She's unlikable. And all of this like surrounding controversy and drama, as bad as the GOP is, it still doesn't make them look very good for a victim of sex trafficking who they were, you know, telling the story of, to come out and say, like, hey, f you guys, which, by the way, we'll get to that.
Didn't take place in the United States or even near the border. They took place in Mexico, in Guadalajara, in Mexico City, and other parts of Mexico.
In fairness, Mexico is just America to be. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe America is just Mexico to be.
Does U.S. policy have a huge role to play in the Mexican drug wars? Do Mexican drug cartels get their weapons from the United States?
We're
Do
blameless.
they get most of the money that they make selling and transiting drugs to the United States? Absolutely.
Oh.
But this didn't happen when Joe Biden was president. It happened 20 years ago when George W. Bush, a Republican, was president. And Jacinto Romero didn't share her story with Senator Brit. Brit tells it like she's like sitting by the banks of the Rio Grande, like holding her hand, like getting her to tell her the story that she won't tell anyone else. I mean, that's sort of the affect that you get watching that video, right? This is a professional activist. I mean, I'm sure she went through the things that she went through. I'm not discounting that at all. And she's clearly a very brave person who has overcome a lot in her life. But she tells this story in public. This is her testifying in front of Congress in 2015, 9 years ago, almost a decade ago. This is what she does. She goes around and tells people this story. And she did it for the senators in January 2023.
not only lying about something that can be fact-checked, but lying about something that can be fact-checked when the subject of your lie is an activist so well known that they've testified to Congress. Like, what? Like, why? Holy shit.
And yet this senator has gone around repeatedly for the past year and change, telling the story over and over again as if this woman had confided something in her.
My guess, this is just my guess, okay? I think the GOP didn't have much input in the speech that she gave, you know? My guess is that they had a template that they wanted her to follow by, and she was given the opportunity to add flares to it. So some of the stuff was guaranteed to be said. A lot of the stuff that was written well before Biden even delivered the State of the Union address. And there was some stuff where they were like, yeah, here, add your personal flair. Being able to deliver the State of the Union address response is like a big career move, and she's considered kind of a rising star, and she's a hot lady, so they're like, okay, we have some leeway in terms of like constructing this, let's add in this bit because we've told this story before. And my guess is she and her team are just really dumb. I think that might be it. This isn't like to their benefit. This isn't some big strategy thing. I think they were just like, yeah, we tell this story, let's put it in, and didn't think at all about like elevating to national scrutiny something that could be fact-checked that easily. Maybe they didn't even remember the extent to which it's made up. There's no strategy explanation for this, you know? I think this is just plain and simple being a idiot.
And as if she was describing actions that had taken place on or even near the US-Mexico border during Joe Biden's presidency. I don't even know what to say except that is just fundamentally dishonest. It goes beyond misleading. She said it in the piece of the video that you saw before. She says, we wouldn't accept these things if they happened in a third world country. Well, they did.
I think the GOP is banking on your voters being low information. No, because that implies that this is like a deliberate choice, and I don't think that it was. I agree the GOP knows their voters are stupid. I just think this was them being stupid, you know? They're not mutually exclusive.
Definitionally a third world country because it wasn't aligned directly with the Soviet Union or the United States. And it is also colloquially a third world country in the sense that it is a non-English speaking country of the global South that is more poor than the United States on average, although it is actually better off than a lot of other countries, even Latin America. But that's neither here nor there. It didn't happen in the United States. It's not an example of something that happened recently, or it's not even an example of something that happened on the border, then there's certainly not something that happened under Joe Biden. So
nice. I don't know what the remainder of the video is, but I feel like this is, yeah, the rest is his thoughts and conjecture. Thank you, Cats on Earth, for making this video. I am crediting you. Credit. I love you. Or something. So yeah, it didn't end there.
We know that President Biden traveled to the Asia were acting.
Not that clip, even though they use it in the goddamn thumb from the New York Post then, because people have no sense of awareness on what videos to embed at the top of their goddamn articles.
For many I work as a spokesperson for many victims who have no voice, and I really would like them to be empathetic. All the governors, all the senators to be empathetic with the issue of human trafficking, because there are millions of girls and boys who disappear all the time. People who are really trafficked and abused, as she mentioned. And I think she should first take into account what really happens before telling a story of that magnitude.
I like that. It's very leveled. It's very like measured activist language. I think I think that she should consider what is or is not factually correct before talking about things. Very nice. Yeah, I have seen pretty much universally negative attention being drawn towards Senator Brit. Just condemnation over all of this, which is great. Because that was a terrible response to the State of the Union address. I'm glad that she's getting, torn into over it. Woman who appears to be at the center of Katie Britt's State of the Union anecdote has message for Alabama senator. Okay, yeah, that's the same clip we just saw. And then a bunch of talking heads repeating the points. Facts don't matter, it's all vibes. Okay, When I say, hey, I think the GOP has made a mistake here, why would they do this? I know all of you want to rush to the chat and say, hey, did you know the GOP lies and they know they can get away with it? I know that, but there's not like an infinite leeway on that. Like, oftentimes they also make mistakes, and we shouldn't... we shouldn't make the mistake of assuming our enemies are more competent than they actually are. The GOP, broadly speaking, is not competent. In fact, they're significantly less competent than the Democrats. There are some things that give them an edge in some respects, a willingness to lie, and the fact that they can capitalize on populism, for example. But in terms of like managing their affairs, they make mistakes constantly. So let's not overstate their competence here. Let's not give them too much credit. Is it that there's no real head of the GOP who's even controlling the messaging of the party or policy priority? Trump doesn't do that shit. That is a good question. Yeah, I've actually wondered that myself. Who does control the GOP? It's not just one person. It never is. The DNC. I imagine the DNC being largely directed by Bill Clintonite old East Coast liberal types. Basically everyone, like just anyone that I can kind of like mentally associate with Clinton's administration. I think like, just any like old, arrogant, wealthy, out of touch, liberal, but in a like milquetoast, very kind of neutral way. With the GOP, you would think, okay, so who leads them? It's definitely not Trump. Trump does not do any broader coordinating with the party. In fact, that's a problem for them, Who controls the GOP? Is it their donors, their investors? Well, to an extent, sure. And that'd be the case for both sides. But in terms of party messaging, like who's actually directing that? And it used to be the neocons, right? Like it used to be a lot easier to identify. But which portion of the MAGA crowd is responsible for this? My guess personally is that no one's at the head right now because nobody can control Trump. The MAGA crowd just kind of, it seems like most of the people who are loud Republican, the people in the MAGA crowd, like MTG, Boebert, whatever, the louder Republicans, it seems like they all just want to be their own little celebrities. Like their jobs are to be loud, aggressive advocates for being wrong, in a way that kind of boosts their celebrity, their fame. But there's not much broader, party coordination going on. I'm not really sure. I get the feeling that Trump leads the party in a kind of stochastic way. Yeah, like Trump just does stuff and the rest of the party kind of clambers behind him to keep up because they know Trump is the one with the mandate of the voters. So anything he says kind of goes. And but he also isn't like coordinating things beforehand. So they all just kind of have to like work to stay abreast of whatever nonsense he's up to at the moment. It's the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. See, I don't agree with that necessarily. I think the Heritage Foundation and Federalist Society are probably both controlled by people who think they're all Machiavellian, chess masters, probably like people who think highly of their big brain, long-term plans for the United States. But I doubt that, like, it's not like they control Trump, If anything, maybe they take advantage of him. They see the direction he moves in and the wake he leaves, and they try to ride that wave. Yeah, I don't really know. If those groups actually had their way, DeSantis would be the nominee. Yeah, exactly. They don't want Trump because Trump can't really be controlled. The Federalist Society directly gave Trump a list of judges to appoint. Trump's 3 SCOTUS picks came from the Federalist Society. Oh yeah, that's not surprising. But that doesn't mean they control the party. The Federalist Society, of course, is going to have a very heavy weight when it comes to any sort of like judicial or legal, direction the GOP is going in. There was some interview with the leader of Heritage Foundation. He was actually a dumbass who believed internet rightoid memes himself. I'd have to see that. I'd have to think. Everyone wants their enemy to be the Illuminati. It's like human instinct. Yeah, it is because, complex systemic issues are difficult for people to grasp. This is one of the reasons why when feminists say, such and such is patriarchy, one of the common straw man arguments you hear in response is right-wing people going like, patriarchy? Well, you mean there's like a secret cabal of men trying to push for men's issues? Who are those men? Like every broad systemic issue has to be literally like led by an organization. They do the same thing with white supremacy too. Well, which group of people's job it is to do that? Well, in that case, there kind of directly is in a lot of cases. But still, systemic issues are never that simple. In a lot of cases, there really isn't any central control for anything. It's just a bunch of kind of stochastic, decentralized people trying to work together but failing because a lot of these people are grifters or super egotistical or just kind of crazy and